Like so work breakdown structure, or generally called WBS, we generally do it in construction planning stage, right? So many people have got confused with, the construction scheduling. They talk about days, calendar days, and people even talk about predecessor relationship and all, right? So that was not work breakdown structure. That's just construction schedule. Work breakdown structure is the initial process that comes in the planning stage. This is just like listing down the task, possible tasks for completing a project, like possible activities are required to complete a project. So that's what basically the work breakdown structure. In fact, I have emphasis in detail when we do construction planning itself. Like I gave you a lot of insights on how you make a work breakdown structure and the significance of work breakdown structure and so on, right? And then I just say maximum of 15 activities. Many people thought like they can do 6 activities, 7 activity, and 15 activity, but this is 15 major activity. The reason the major I've just mentioned here is that like there is a heading and subheading and can have a subheading also, right? So work breakdown structures that, right? So not many people have realized that. And some of you have no idea what is garage also. Garage is where you park your cars and something like that. So I understand that some people will get wrong, and they might think it's as a garbage or something like that. But then that's why I've just gave you a hint like can accommodate a maximum of 1 car or something like that. In Core Tantra, I even made the car to be sedan type, like you understand what a sedan, right? So bigger car, right? So that's why I just gave you a hint also, the 300 square feet. And many people talk about, reinforcement beams, 4 in numbers, 6 in numbers, and so on. But 300 square feet, if you could able to provide, 1 or 2 beam itself is more than sufficient, right? People who talk about 6 beams, 8 beams, right? So which means that they're not thinking like this is what you're gonna do when you go for a job. Like your client can give you this specifications, and you have to develop a particular solution to it, or design to it, or even construction schedule to it, right? Something like that. So I'll explain you work breakdown structure once again. So for the benefit of the people who still have not much understanding about this, maybe that'll be useful for your fact exam. Or this concept is the fundamental building block for any construction project management or even any project management as well, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's take a look at some example from this question itself. Then I talk about installation of electrical components. Right? So whenever I just ask a particular thing, like this is a construction of a simple garage, it's fine. Reinforcement, foundation is fine. But this is just installation process. Many people have no idea about this. Then they start writing from the earthwork excavation itself. So that's totally wrong. When given a particular concept, you should really focus on that. Not necessary you have to beat around the bush or you start from the scratch. That's a very famous, mentoring video, in which the mentor asked one of the student to memorize alphabets, English alphabets from A to Z. Right, so it's the student have have a diploma in some college degree, right? So it will be intimidating for that student. It's pretty easy. The student next day comes and then the mentor asks like, "Have you memorized that?" and something like that. And then the mentor asks like, the student might think it's very easy. The mentor asks, "Can you recite that from the reverse, like Z to A? Start from Z to A." The student will have a difficulty. So that the mentor says, "Come next day, memorizing that." And the next day, the student comes and the student recites from Z to A. But then, like that mentor asks, what is the 17th, letter in English alphabet? Student have no clue because her vision is like one A to Z and Z to A. Then the next time the student, understands the problem and she starts memorizing numbers, and then finally the learning ends. So which means that you should have a deeper understanding of the concept. Whenever a work breakdown structure is asked, like I've just told you plenty of time, it not necessarily for a complete project, even a specific components or specific construction work package, they call work packages. You should be in a position to write them. Like say for example, like the exam itself is just like 60 minutes, right? So it's a 1 hour duration, right? So we can't expect you to draw everything like the construction scheduling. That's why people spend a lot of time in preparing scheduling and then they could not finish, in a great sense. So that's not really intended. So every time I prepare a question, I just look into the time associated with that, right? So you can give minimum description, but in a the amount of discussion you should provide is it should be very appropriate to the question asked, not necessarily in this case. Like many people started with earthwork excavation, which is not necessary. Say for example, if you travel from, if you come to VIT Chennai, nobody's going to ask you which station you board train or something like this. They say, how do you come? It's by Central Railway Station of Chennai, or even if you come by air, it is just like Chennai Airport, and then you reach college. Nobody's going to ask you which street you live in, and which road you take in your native place, and which auto or something like that you took or something like that. No, those details are unnecessary, right? So those are redundant details, so which is not necessary um, for this particular question. So that's why you had really spent a lot of time wasting the things that is not necessary to them. And I also mentioned in Core Tantra that we'll be avoiding electronic components, right? So besides that, many people have given about Wi-Fi connections, and then the LAN cable connections and so on. So I just kindly read the question carefully before you answering it. Like, fine, if you don't know much about electrical component, you can talk about house wiring or bus bar, or even a fan. Installation of a fan is an electrical component, right? So air condition is an electrical component, and TV and all does not comes under electrical component, but connection sockets to the TV and other electronic components or electrical components. So that's pretty much. Few students have really written very exemplary, so I've given them 9, which is a maximum for this for this question. For this particular electrical component, they talk about bus bar, they talk about transmitters and the transformers, and then they also talk about the house wiring, and then they also talk about the electric board meter, and so on. So they have got a really good sense of understanding. You don't have to really understand. If you just imagine your house, different electrical components, then you can probably write this question with much easier, right? And same way, plumbing units, um, water supply is not a very detailed one, it's a very generic one. So people only have got water supply, uh, plumbing units. Then not many people realize that the waste water pipeline is also plumbing units. They only talk about drinking water and other related stuff like something like that. You take a simple building, it has got a simple residential building, like in our example I've showed you a simple residential building. It has got a bath, toilet, kitchen, and it also have got other elements like water tank and septic tanks and sewer lines and something like that. So if for the few seconds I could able to give you 8 activities, and just it requires a maximum of just 15, so it not take much time, right? So but many people flunk in question number 2. I'll explain you with I've an example now, so that'll be easy for you to understand the concept in much detail, right? Take a look at installation of electrical components. Say I'll just unshare this, I'll open and so I just say WBS for electrical installations, and the scope, not necessarily this one. So what is this process? Residential. So it's a so that gives us an idea of it as house wiring, right? So in other sense, it is electrification. So this not don't worry about this. This is for my understanding, for explaining you. So how do I get the idea of this? Like, so I'm gonna prepare a WBS for electrical installation. First, what you do is you just okay, list down few, activities or some tasks, right? First step is identifying the requirements, or more specifically, so first we need to identify the electrical requirements. Then you can even talk about procurement of, you can even do the same. So just for a ditto, you can have a procurement process and something like that, and something like this is pretty much called as a specification. All these things are major head. Like I'll come back to the subdivision, right? And procurement of that, and type of, you can even put here as take off. This identification of electrification requires all, not only the type of electrical equipments required, but also the components, of the nature of wiring and something like that as well. Let's say, for example, electrification of main boards. This has got, the general, then electrification of interiors. Interiors, and you can call that to be zonal electrification, and then electrification of exteriors. You can call external electrification, right? Then you can subdivide into, 3.1. It talks about, main board connection, talks about bus bars, earthing. This is very important. We talk about outside connections, right? So general electrification. Then you can talk about the out, or you can even call common area utility. Just the common area, something like that, right? So that part's something like, so I can, right? So this or subdivision, or you can even further subdivide into earth construction and so on, right? So this is how you generally provide, work breakdown structure. So maybe next time you can talk about this in detail. Or another thing which is not necessary, but just understand that. Let me say this is the serial number, which tells us like, all this, and you can talk about activities or tasks, and then you can just like classifications. And one important thing, which is not necessarily but understand, it is called Phoebeus dictionary. So which is not there, which we have not considered for grading, but I'm just explaining you what is that a dictionary. So not many people understand that what is this electrification. So in that case, you have to write electrification process of providing electrical uh, or process of installing electrical components or the uh, procedure involved in the standard operating practices or codes. So you can explain this in paragraph so that it will be useful for people who comes later and understand.